Hello, Brian. Very nice to meet you.
Hi, Sean. Good to catch up with you.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for doing this. Just wanted to know more about yourself and what you do at BlockchainNZ and your involvement with blockchain itself. So, first of all, I understand you're is it a senior associate at Minter Allison Rudd-Watt? Is that correct?
Yeah, I am. I am a senior associate in the financial services team of Mentor Allison Rudd Watts, all one word, um, and all caps, no gaps. That's how we spell the name of the firm. I am particularly focused on fintech and virtual assets and their regulation. I work with a number of VASPs and VASP projects looking to either launch new virtual assets or are looking to provide some kind of service for virtual assets. Apart from that, I'm also an investment funds lawyer and financial services lawyer, helping out fund managers, DIMS providers, some financial advice entities, derivatives issuer providers, just to name a few.
Wow, that sounds very interesting indeed, and I like the level of detail or caps with no space as well. Very nice.
That's the first thing you learn at the firm during induction.
Wow. So I'm guessing it's or at the moment four partners or four founders they would be.
It's got a long history. The firm's got a long history. At the moment, Minter Allison Rudd Watts is part of the Minter Allison Group. It's a group of law firms around the world, mostly in the Asia Pacific region. Minter Allison Australia is one of the largest law firms in Australia, and we've got a close relationship with the Australian teams. And apparently there's even a Minter Allison in Ulaanbaatar, which I am keen to visit after the pandemic.
Oh, that'd be a nice trip out there. So I guess now that we know a bit about yourself, you've been, everyone's got a rabbit hole story, so to speak, in the blockchain, Bitcoin, the crypto space. So what's your rabbit hole story? Do you remember when you first came across this technology?
It was, I first came across Bitcoin back in around 2013 during the whole Silk Road situation. And at the time, I thought it was a load of magic beans. Sorry, I think my connection's a bit unstable. So let me know if you have any issues on your end. So around 2013, I thought Bitcoin was just a whole bunch of magic beans, internet money. I thought at the time it was centralized, controlled by a small group of people, and also was a conduit for money laundering, the dark web, like Silk Road. But it was not until around late 2016 that I became drawn to it again, became a bit more open-minded, and I dove deep into Bitcoin and its technology. I read the white paper a number of times. I read all of the footnotes, read a lot of some accompanying materials like Nick Szabo's Shelling Out, and became very ingrained in, I guess, the ethos of Bitcoin and decentralization and autonomy. I think also I discovered Roger Ver around that time, who's become a bit of like an idol for me, though I'm not a Bitcoin Cash supporter. And so I think from that, what was a personal passion eventually became a professional, opportunity for me. as blockchain technology reached the mainstream in 2017, there are opportunities for me to work on different crypto projects during that bull cycle. And I started working on ICOs. ICOs were the thing back then. I worked on a really complex and interesting ICO for an infamous internet entrepreneur, and that's become, I guess, the bedrock for my virtual asset practice today.
Wow, sounds very interesting. When you talk about 2013, I think that's about the same time I got in there as well, around the Silk Road. And I remember very clearly on One News with Peter Williams, I believe, talking about Silk Road. So that just reminds me, when you said 2013 as well. And yeah,
I wish I bought back then, but yeah.
yes, same here. I remember it actually being very hard to buy. I mean, I didn't know where to go to buy it at that time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we bought back then, we would have been caught up with the Mt. Gox hack, and we would have lost a whole bunch of our coins.
Yeah, exactly. And when you talk about infamous entrepreneurs, the first thing that comes to my mind is either Kim.com or John McAfee, but we won't go there. Yeah. So with the rabbit hole story, then, where in that timeline did you get connected with BlockchainNZ?
It was around maybe late 2017 that I started attending the events. A lot of the blockchain events were being run by Mark Pascal and his team. And I enjoyed going to a lot of the events were being hosted by Centrality in Auckland, Emily Place. And I enjoyed meeting up with a lot of blockchain enthusiasts, made a lot of friends who I'm still friends with today through those events. And then got to really immerse myself in a lot of the New Zealand crypto blockchain projects. Some of those projects have actually grown impressively since, and I've been able to work with some of them. So it's great to actually see the New Zealand crypto environment mature and watch it grow pretty much from the outset.
I was just thinking to myself that that's a fantastic background, and I need one of those backgrounds. So maybe you can email me the file afterwards. It's so appropriate.
Yeah, I will. Thanks to, I think it's Kerry who sent it to me. I'll send it to you after this.
Yeah, I should be more organized, but that's fantastic. And then I guess with the connection to, from the events onto BlockchainNZ, we have certain passion projects, as you know. What is your particular passion project within the association or the Executive Council?
I'm really passionate about I'm passionate about all things blockchain and crypto. But for the Executive Council, I have two passion projects. One passion project is in relation to the regulation of VASPs, virtual asset service providers, and virtual assets. And BlockchainNZ is an independent body here in New Zealand has a unique opportunity to act as, I guess, the counterpoint for financial standard for standard financial institutions as well as virtual asset service providers, and being able to, I guess, continue dialogue on how VASPs could be regulated, how they could interact with the conventional economy, speaking to government bodies. I think BlockchainNZ has a great role in helping to shape that dialogue. And I'm really privileged to be a part of that dialogue. My other passion project is for digital identity. Um, I think there's different types of digital identity, but one of my legal practice areas is anti-money laundering laws. And I've worked with Digital Identity New Zealand to help them write a report on anti-money laundering reliance and the use of digital identity. And I think ever since then, it's become a passion for me, largely because I think you've got different forms of digital identity. One is self-sovereign digital identity, which uses blockchain technology. I think combining those two interests is quite natural. I think also digital identity is probably one of the key barriers to really unlocking the digital economy, and a trustworthy way for both service providers, but also the users of the digital economy. And I think if New Zealand can really solve that, or can really, I guess, embrace and unlock digital identity, then its digital economy will just be completely unleashed.
Neat, very nice. So just going back to VASP, because you mentioned VASP and digital identity. If we look at VASP itself, I think you said it stands for Virtual Asset Service Provider, right? So what would be an example? I mean, is an exchange a virtual asset provider? Is a company that creates an ICO, are they a virtual asset provider? What's the definition?
It's a really broad definition, and it's a good question to ask. An exchange is a virtual asset service provider, like a centralized exchange, like Dasset, a virtual asset broker like Easy Crypto is a virtual asset service provider, and even a project that issues a virtual asset in the form of like an ICO or its derivatives. It itself is a virtual asset service provider. And there's some regulatory issues relating to that, but I think that the most immediate one is the need to comply with anti-money laundering laws. So in New Zealand, virtual asset service provider is quite broad, and it's really any service provider that's touching virtual assets or dealing with virtual assets in some way.
Ah, I see. So are you saying that if someone in New Zealand, like a company, wants to create an ICO or issue tokens, etc., or deal with these virtual assets, they need to, who do they reach out to? Do they reach out to the VAS committee, or who is it exactly?
Well, I should add that this is not legal advice. I'm kidding, half kidding. I think the first thing they should do is, just based on the Department of Internal Affairs guidance, they should reach out to the DIA and let them know that they're conducting this type of virtual asset service. And then from there, they should take some legal advice, or if they're comfortable with the regulatory implications, they should set up their compliance procedures and controls before launching their service.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah, because I can imagine a lot of people, they have this great idea and it's all about the technology, but then they skip over all the other parts of the business, such as legal and, as you mentioned, going to the DIA, for example, to understand more about what they're actually doing, which is very fascinating, actually.
Yeah, I think so. I think, unfortunately, public blockchains inherently increase the risk for money laundering or terrorism financing. And so I think the regulations do make sense. But in New Zealand, virtual assets and virtual asset service providers, they're not being disincentivized to do business or to be launched. It's just that we need to accommodate some of the regulations which have a really solid purpose.
And just before I jump onto digital identity with a VASP, how open is the group? I mean, if people want more information, if they want to be involved, I mean, how can they do that, or are they able to do that?
Yeah, there's public information on the Department of Internal Affairs website. The Financial Markets Authority has also released some guidance on virtual assets and virtual asset service providers. And I think they are a pretty good start. From there, there's a lot of material online if you Google it. And I'm sure some of the different law firms, including my one, you'll probably find some materials on our websites.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. So now moving on to your second passion project, which you mentioned as digital identity. It's quite a large area. So how would you describe the general area itself?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. Digital identity, it's you could interpret it really broadly and define it as your internet footprint as a person, as a user of the internet, or you could define it as a collection of your different social media profiles. You can define it as your various logins. If you consume some kind of internet service, you generally need to log in to their service. And from their perspective, that you have some digital identity with them. Some internet service providers are also financial institutions and have to comply with New Zealand anti-money laundering laws. And so those types of service providers will probably have a little more detail about you. So your digital identity from their perspective would need to comply with AML KYC requirements, for example. And so I guess digital identity depends on the service provider, the counterpoint. But I guess its value, I think, is with something like self-sovereign identity, where you can control who has access to your identity. You could potentially monetize it, or using distributed ledger technology. And so I think there's a lot of frictions right now for regulated entities to do KYC, for example, and removing those frictions by making it easier for them to identify their customer, I think will have a lot of economic benefit. It'll benefit not just the service provider, but also customers.
Yeah, I came across self-sovereign identity, for example, a couple of years ago, where there were several projects around, actually quite a number around the world, talking about self-sovereign identity, where the user could own their own, say, personal health data or health metrics, etc. And then they could use cryptography and blockchain technologies to release it to, say, a physiotherapist or their dentist, for example, for a certain period of time, but then they would personally still own it. And it sounds great in theory. And when I first came across it, I was like, wow, this is amazing. But I mean, how practical is that to becoming a reality? Because it feels it could be like many, many years out.
Yeah, in practice, there are a lot of practical barriers to to implementing a sound digital identity ecosystem. New Zealand's actually one of the first, or I think the first, to have its government try and support the creation of a digital identity ecosystem. Last year, around August last year, the government announced a digital identity trust framework, and that project's being led by the Department of Internal Affairs, and the DIA's working with a number of different participants in the ecosystem, whether they're network providers or they're AML reporting entities, or I think even some of the AML supervisors are part of those discussions. So it'll be interesting to see how that trust framework plays out. There'll also be there's a digital identity bill that'll be released, and so there'll be special legislation that'll be the legal framework for this trust framework. So I'm interested to see how this all plays out. It's still really early, but conceptually really exciting, because it could be world leading.
Yeah. And just finally, one question on digital identity around Real Me. I mean, was Real Me an attempt? Not sure if you know this. Was it an attempt to bring digital identity into a centralized location for, I guess, most of the government departments?
I'm not an expert on Real Me. I have looked at it in my day job, and I think to some degree it was meant to be a digital identity solution, but I think I guess its usage, I'm not sure how widely used it is, and so I think for any digital identity framework to be successful, there needs to be sufficient scale. And it's possible that this new digital identity trust framework will revisit how Real Me is being used in New Zealand.
Looking into the future now, doing a bit of crystal ball gazing, where do you see this technology going in the next 5 to 10 years? And in particular, around the passion projects you mentioned, VASP and digital identity?
I mean, I guess my hope is in 5 years' time, we have a fully functioning digital identity trust framework in New Zealand, and will be the envy of the world. And that framework would hopefully really unlock our e-commerce and fintech industries, to name a few. In terms of VASPs, by then we'd probably be in the middle of another bull market, and then we'd probably be talking about Bitcoin being worth, like several trillion or maybe 10 trillion, might be the size of gold by then. And hopefully by then we have, I guess, a lot more integration between the ecosystem and maybe even some central maybe launched by then. But I think we're in, I guess, a once in a lifetime transformational period right now, and I just think even in the next year, things might be really different if we catch up and talk about VASPs and digital identity.
Yeah, I agree. Things are moving so fast in this space. And you talk about the market cap. I think Bitcoin's just dropped to like 44,000 at the moment. It's on its way down apparently. So we'll see what happens in the months to come. Well, thank you very much for that, Bryan. I know you're a super busy person. It's Monday. You probably have a full week ahead, but thank you very much again for spending some time with us, and I'll catch you next time.
Thanks for having me, Sean. Great to talk to you.